Hello, and welcome to New Directions East Asia 2021. I hope everybody is enjoying the conference so far. This breakout session is entitled The Effects of Dynamic Assessment on Writing Achievement of Indonesian third-year university students. And the presenter is Cecilia Helimi. Cecilia is a senior lecturer in the Department of Linguistics, Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. She has been conducting various research in ELT for many years now and is an active member of the Association of Teaching English as a Foreign Language in Indonesia, otherwise known as TEFLIN, since 2003, and now is the vice president of that organization. Excellent stuff. If you have any questions for the presenter, just type them into the chat box during any time of the session. We're going to have 10 minutes at the end where we can hopefully address those questions. I'll now hand over to our presenter, Cecilia. Please start sharing your screen and begin when you're ready.
Okay, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning for those who are not in Asia. Well, in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to present the study that I conducted in one of the universities in Indonesia. But before that, allow me to explain some important information related to dynamic assessment. Well, dynamic assessment is an approach which integrates both teaching and assessment activities at the same time. Dynamic assessment, as a specific kind of assessment, provides corrective feedback, which emphasizes the process of learning. And it is an approach to assessment and instruction derived from Vygotsky's theory of the zone of proximal development. The term itself was first introduced by Luria in 1961. Dynamic assessment challenges traditional teaching and testing approaches. The dynamic approach argues that a full picture of student performance requires the person performance with assistance from someone else, and the extent to which the person can benefit from this assistance not only in completing the same task or test, but in transferring this mediated performance to different tasks or tests. Let's discuss the three components of dynamic assessment. The first one is intentionality. It refers to probes, questions, hints, and clues from a mediator to assist a learner to do a task that is within his or her zone of proximal development, but he or she cannot do alone. The second component, reciprocity, refers to the learner's ability to respond to the instructor's mediation, to determine the amount and quality of mediation needed to produce significant cognitive changes in their performance. And then the last one is transcendence. This refers to the ultimate purpose of the mediated learning, that is cognitive development. So the researchers believe, so I believe that with dynamic assessment, a mediator achieves a more detailed insight of a learner's potential abilities than with a non-dynamic test. And the mediator is also able to enhance development in the learner by teaching at the same time as testing. There are two approaches to dynamic assessment. The first one is interactionist, and the second one is interventionist. In interactionist dynamic assessment, leading question, hints, or prompts are not pre-planned. Instead, they stem from mediated dialogue between the examiner and the examinee, or between the teacher and the student, in which the examiner responds to the examinee's needs and continually readjusts his or her mediation. In interventionist dynamic assessment, a predetermined list of hints followed rigidly during assessment activities in order to produce easily quantifiable results. Some researchers, such as Sternberg and Grigorenko, differentiate between sandwich format and cake format of dynamic assessment. The sandwich format model usually consists of 3 phases. They are pre-test, mediation, and post-test. The layer cake model refers to the procedures in which mediation is given during the test administration, usually whenever a problem occurs. Now, how about this study? This study implemented the interventionist dynamic assessment approach with sandwich model. The research was conducted for 1 semester, involving the teacher and student of a 3rd-year writing course in an English studies program in one of the universities in Indonesia. This study did not set out to test a particular hypothesis, but it aimed to offer a rich and thick description of the implementation of dynamic assessment in one particular context. Now let's discuss the methodology. Although the research did focus on both the teacher and the student, in this presentation, I will focus only on the students and their writing. To find out how well the student understood the teacher's feedback and whether the changes they made brought about improvement, the student writing was analyzed, which involved some computation and also statistical analysis. Therefore, this study involved the use of a combination of qualitative and quantitative data. The participants of this study are 15 students out of 20 students. So the course was attended by 20 students, but 5 students did not submit all their work. So only 15 students were involved in the study, 1 lecturer and 4 raters. The 3 components of dynamic assessment were implemented in this study, and a case study involving collaboration between the researcher and the writing teacher was selected as the method of study. The mediation provided for each task is feedback from the teacher who acted as a mediator. Both content feedback and language and organization feedback, or form feedback, were provided. And the 2 important features in the studies were, 1, the 3-stage draft process that the student went through when writing their composition, and written feedback specifically focusing on content in the first draft and on language and organization in the second draft. And the student had to attend to the feedback when they revised their draft. To capture the student learning processes in the study, they were asked to write learning diaries regularly, expressing their opinions, feelings, comments, and etc. about their writing class. They were also asked to react aloud to their teacher's feedback and tape recorded their reaction as soon as they received the first and second drafts. They were also interviewed at the beginning of the course and each time after they submitted the 3rd draft of each task. In providing a mediation, the teacher was required to pay attention to a set of guidelines for providing thoughtful feedback on students' writing. Preliminary meetings and practice for both the teachers and the student were provided before the study started. And the student writing was evaluated by raters other than the teacher to determine its quality. Adopting the sandwich model, the study is different from other studies in that the pre-task were writing the first and second drafts with a different focus of mediation. And the third draft was produced as the post-task. So there is no pre and post-task in this study. Well, there are some data collection techniques used in this study. They are diary writing, think-aloud protocol, interviews, participant observation, and the use of analytical marking scheme. For data analysis, Ziff and Jagelski schemes are adopted to analyze the instances of teachers' feedback and the student revision on the draft of their writing. The purpose of the coding was to examine the effects of the teachers' feedback on individuals' papers, whereas the teachers' and raters' evaluation of each draft was meant to examine the quality of each written product. After coding the data, the researcher correlated the teachers' feedback with the students' action on their next drafts and analyzed what changes, if any, had been made as a result of the teacher's feedback. Using this analysis, the researcher tried to examine how the student in this study revised their texts. The draft of the student writing, their think-aloud protocols, and their diaries were also used to help construct a description of their writing process with a focus on revision. So here are the findings. The findings can be divided into three big topics. The first one is the student responses to the teacher's feedback. So the data of this part is the think-aloud protocols. The student produced various responses that can be condensed into 6 groups as follows. So student confirmed the teacher's feedback. The second one is student understood the teacher's intention and mentioned or knew how to revise. And then the third one, student understood the teacher's intention, but they did not mention or know how to revise. The fourth one, student did not understand the teacher's intention. And then next is the student explained their own writing intention. And the last one is student did not respond to the teacher's feedback. And from the analysis of the student responses, the students were able to understand more than 75% of the intention of the teacher's content feedback on their first draft for all 3 tasks. This finding is different for the form feedback. So for the form feedback, the students were able to understand more than 70% of the intention of the teacher's feedback on their second draft in task 2 and task 3, but they only understood less than 55% of the teacher's form feedback in task 1. This is because the teacher didn't pay attention to the guideline provided and only underlined the errors without any editing symbol. After listening to this think-aloud protocols in task 2 and task 3, the teacher paid attention to the guidelines, and therefore we can see that the student understood better. And then the second finding is related to the student revision. The student made more than 85% of the changes suggested by the teacher, both for the content feedback and for the form feedback in task 1, task 2, and task 3. And three different reasons for not taking any action in response to the teacher's feedback. The first one is they did not perceive the intention of the teacher's feedback, or they disagreed with the teacher's feedback, or they perceived the teacher's intention, but they did not know how to revise their drafts. This descriptive data show that understanding the intention of the teacher's feedback is not always followed by a revision or a correct revision. The last finding is related to the quality of change. First is the content quality. A careful study of their writing reveals that the revision they made were varied in their quality. From task 1 to task 3, the student have become more capable in revising the content of their writing once they receive a prompt from their teacher. This is also the same for language and organization quality. So there was improvement from task 1 to task 3. How about the overall quality? I did not present the statistical analysis here, but actually I also did the statistical analysis. So the result of the statistical analysis of the student revision in this study are different from the conclusion from previous studies, in which students in this study seem to focus on both lower level concern and also broader concern when revising. In the previous studies, students seem to focus on lower level concern rather than broader concern. Here refers to the form feedback, forms and content. Yeah, so the way the mediation was provided in this study seems to reinforce the student tendencies to focus on both level concerns. This finding confirms what Yagalski found in his study, that the instructional factor seems to play a role in influencing the student revision practices. The student had the ability to revise successfully when they were helped to identify the problems in their writing. They were even able to transfer the mediated performance from one task to other tasks. So the conclusion are, one, the result of the analysis show that when the teacher's feedback identified clearly how the student should revise their writing, they did not hesitate to add, substitute, delete, or rearrange what they had written. And then the content improvement that the student made in this study is higher than the form improvement that they made in all tasks. And then a mediation should form an essential part of the process of writing. And it is important to provide staged written feedback that focuses separately on content and form. The mediation provided by the teacher has been implemented successfully in that the student were not only able to transfer mediated performance to a single task, but they were also able to transfer it to different tasks. So my recommendation, I think conducting more research on the effects of the mediation used in this study for long-term writing ability is really needed. And the second recommendation, many established mediation techniques should be used in teaching writing because all of them have their merits. And the mediation used in this study can usefully be added to a teacher's repertoire of feedback techniques because this studies has already shown that this mediation are effective. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for this wonderful research and great presentation. There is one question that has just come in, so I'm going to just copy it very quickly for you so you can just give me 1 second. Okay. So it comes from Mimi Naharian Nazwani Mohammed, who says, thank you for the presentation. The Think Aloud protocol is an interesting yet complex method. Could you elaborate on how you managed this method? How did the participants manage in performing this method? How many trials did they need to go through? Very interesting question.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. Well, as I mentioned earlier, that I did some practice before I started my study. So I teach the student how to do the Think Aloud protocol by showing them some examples. And then after that, I did the Think Aloud protocol, not at their convenient time, but I usually did it before the class started. So it was in the class. So in a language lab, I asked them to go to the language lab and then read the teacher's feedback, and then they did it directly. So by that, I think the student were serious in doing their task. And I think I didn't miss any data because everyone did their task. And I did it, I think, 6 times, yeah, because after the first I spent a lot of time in transcribing this Think Aloud protocol because a lot of data. Yeah, so after there is for task 1, after they receive the feedback on content, they went to the lab and then they did the Think Aloud protocol. So they recorded, they think aloud response to the teacher's feedback. So that's one of the key points here. So I asked them to go to the lab. It was before the class started, so I managed to collect all the data. Thank you.
I hope this answers the questions. We have another question from Radhika De Silva. It says, thank you for this interesting presentation. Was this computer-based writing? How did the teacher provide feedback using a rubric?
Okay, well, this is not a computer-based writing, so it is a face-to-face writing class, and then the teachers provide. Well, actually, at the, when I conducted this study, I wanted to introduce the teachers to provide what is called the facilitative feedback. So I don't want the teachers to steal the student's voice. So instead of correcting all the errors, the teachers were asked to provide feedback in the form of suggestion or question, and let the student decide whether they wanted to revise the writing or not. And I used the rubric not for providing the feedback, but for grading the students' writing.
Mimi says, good idea, go to the lab, thank you. I just want to make a comment that what you just said about how the feedback was not corrective necessarily, but more suggestive in a way. I really like this idea because I think it makes the students think for themselves, and they can make the decision if they want to take that suggestion or reject it. So I think that's quite interesting. I have another quick question while we're waiting for a few more from the audience. Were there any surprising findings for you?
Sorry?
Did any of the findings surprise you? Were you expecting what you found?
Well, actually, I didn't expect that the student did a lot of revision on content. Yeah, so because the previous studies showed that they paid more attention to form feedback than content feedback. But this time, I think they really can improve the quality of their writing. We provided the feedback, the content feedback on the first draft, and then after that, the form feedback. So they didn't produce the same errors again, I think, when they wrote the third draft. Yeah.
We have 2 more questions from the audience. One is from Yang Tran, who says, I usually have 30 to 40 students in a writing class. Share some ideas on how to implement DA well in a large class like this.
Yeah. Well, it is hard with even 20 students. It was hard. I think I really had to change the teacher. I mean, to provide the feedback on time, but it was because of the study. Yeah? So I had to make sure that the teachers provided the feedback on time. But I think if you want to implement a dynamic assessment, yes, there is no excuse of not providing it on time, yeah, because it is from the feedback that student will be able to learn, I think, how to improve their writing. Well, one of the possibility is I also conducted another study in which I use peer feedback. And when I trained them how to provide feedback, it turned out that they were also able to provide effective feedback. Yeah, so if you have a big class, train your students first to how to provide feedback, and then you can ask them to work in pair and provide feedback to each other. I think in my study it worked. And well, even though it was not a writing class, it was about diary writing. So I want students to practice for fluency, and I asked them to write diary 1 entry per week. And I asked another student to respond to the other student writing, and it worked. It, I think, helped the other student to improve their writing.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, peer assessment, definitely. And maybe also, you know, these writings could be anonymized and made copies of, so that the students don't feel a bit intimidated. We have one more question from Beatrice Ivanovita. Thank you for this enlightening session. Which one is more efficient, immediate or delayed feedback? At what stage are they efficient?
Okay, well, I think it depends, yeah. For writing, I think it is hard to provide immediate feedback, yeah, because I think the student have to submit their work first, and then after that you provide the feedback. But for a speaking class, well, a speaking class also, it really depends, yeah. If you have already made an agreement with the student and the student are fine, if you provide immediate feedback, that would be more effective, yeah. But I think some students, they don't want to receive immediate feedback because it is a kind of threatening for them. So I think you are the one who knows which one will be effective for your students, yeah. And even for one class to another class, it also varies.
I agree with what you're saying, because I remember when I was teaching, yes, there are certain classes where, especially probably adult students, they really wanted immediate feedback all the time. And I had to step back a little bit and try to explain that, yes, immediate feedback, but again, how much time do you allow them to speak before you interrupt them? So what I used to do, for example, is I used to collect on a piece of paper as I was walking around the classroom and listening to them. And at the end of the class, I would just put a few things on the board and ask them what they thought and how these things could be corrected. So yes, it's a very, it's a personal choice, I guess, as a teacher, and also knowing your students and what works best for them. We do have a few more minutes for questions. I don't see any more in the chat. But if you had any final remarks that you wanted to share with the audience.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to share, yeah, with a lot of, with the participants of this seminar or conference. Yeah, I believe that if you teach writing, you have to really have a lot of time, yeah, because I believe that the feedback is very important in helping students improve their writing. So if you don't provide feedback to your student writing, then you won't be able to see significant improvement in their writing. So I think as writing teachers, we really have to allocate time to provide feedback to our students, and also at the same time provide feedback on their performance also, not only feedback for improving their writing but also feedback for their performance. I think that's all my final remark, and thank you for the opportunity to share this with you all.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for this wonderful talk. You're getting lots of thank yous from the audience. I just want to remind our audience to complete a short survey, which you can find on the top right corner, just below the chat box. And just to remind you to join the discussion in our community space. And thank you again for this wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Enjoy the conference.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.